All right, James. I want to give a shout out to one of my great watchers, which I have many. I'm very grateful for them. BTD, my fellow New Yorker, my Maltese American. He was and a Christian. Basically, it was mentioning the video you had where obviously you were talking about a lot of these Greek concepts, the Greek lyric book, saying many things, of course, referring to a God, right? And referring to many things that you see later in Christianity. Of course, you had mentioned the Greek language is a huge part of the New Testament and the Bible in general. So in terms of also, we had mentioned, unfortunately, we have noticed, and I've noticed this growing up as someone who's not particularly religious, many of the that's the Protestants, and I'm not ripping on Protestantism, but I'm just saying the whole thing was, well, Catholics are not Christians, which to me growing up in New York and it was always like, what are you talking about? You wouldn't be Christians if you didn't have Catholics, right? And I'm not trying to make a thing of that, but we were talking about the concepts where he was saying, where even like in Beowulf, the idea of, he was mentioning the metod and the weird, I get WYRD, mentioning also that, even at one point, even the chosen ones were pagans at one point, right? Not monotheistic. You had mentioned too in the Old Testament that they mentioned that there's other gods that exist. And also the idea that BTD was saying, where it's nice to see like the pagan Christian kind of thing with Beowulf, in terms of like, we're not as, I mean, I love Varg, but Varg is he's like a very high Protestant in his paganism, as I've mentioned before, right? Where there's more of a commonality. And you have mentioned too, there's a lot of the Protestants, a lot of them are like, Catholics are not Christians, which to me boggles my mind. But in reference to my watchers, comments, which was really appreciated, by the way, what are your thoughts on these things that he had mentioned?
Oh, well, in Beowulf, I think I counted 20 terms for God. Not discussing various gods or anything, but 20 terms for God Almighty, including weaver on the loom of war. The ancients would have never accused the masculine god of weaving on a woman's cloth making implement.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's probably a case where the spinning female fate in the earlier version of that work, where her duties had been taken over by God. Okay,
Yeah.
and it kind of had been clumsily done. Somebody along the line probably chuckled about it. The the whole idea with, I remember Protestant kids telling me that my parents were devil worshippers because they were Catholics. And when
I remember hearing that in Pennsylvania too.
I spent time with different people from different denominations across the country, and most Protestants will exclude most Protestant denominations from Christianity.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, so this is not the case for the first 200 years of Christianity. Okay, when they're underground and they're developing their own civic system, their own government, their own punishments for people that go against their precepts, their own welfare system for orphans and so on. They still had presbyters, prophets, and they had bishops. Now, there were also deacons. The deacon basically took care of the orphans and stuff, and he did the money and he did the logistics and that type of thing. You actually had prophets, and you had ongoing miracles. There, in the 200s AD, a great debate starts to take place as the bishops take control, because now it becomes obvious that the Roman Empire is in real trouble. They are going to need a functional civic apparatus. They're going to need a civil service because their whole system is corrupt and it's imploding. So the Christians are there to fulfill this. So now the Christians have the opportunity for power. And the bishops, the presbyters or the elders, they go away. The presbyters can keep their mouth shut now. The bishops got, when the bishops take over from the presbyters, they are now academically deciding on what everybody believes. There's no longer a discussion with the oldest guys who knew the apostles. Nothing like that. Now it's all book learning. It's all the guy that came out of the university. It's very much like what we have now. And the prophets have to go. You can no longer prophesize, or else you will be killed for being a heretic. You can no longer have a prophet, and you can no longer have miracles. For the most part, 325, the First Council of Nicaea, when Constantine sanctions Christianity as not the only religion, or the only state religion, but he makes it the state religion, and other people are still allowed to practice whatever religion they want, but he makes it the favored religion, and the bishops become his mayors and governors. And he's got 900 of them. There's over 900 bishops.
Oh my God.
These people are conducting debates where they're racing on horses and donkeys and chariots along the Roman roads to have debates in front of Constantine. What does Constantine, who doesn't seem to become a Christian until he's dying?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Constantine calls these bishops when he's sitting on a stool humbly amongst them. And whenever he's asked a question about what he thinks, he says, "It's not my place. It's up to ye high gods to decide what faith is." So, okay, he probably doesn't fit any current Christian's idea of what a Christian is, even though he's essentially the father of civic Christianity. The person that seems to have done the most to convince the various warring bishops of antiquity, and 5 or 6 of these guys had armies of fanatics of their own. They would get crazy monks, guys that started themselves out in the desert, and gangs of gladiators, and they would just go murder people.
Well, there was a higher patient, right?
Yeah, and there was lots of stuff like this that went on. The person that seems to have solidified the notion that there has to be a written doctrine, that not a single line is fungible, not a single line is open to meaningful interpretation, was St. Augustine, or Augustine of Hippo. He wrote Confessions, he wrote City of God, and he also wrote On Christian Doctrine, which I forced myself to listen to over and over again when I was in extreme pain 2 years ago when I was crippled. And he was a Gnostic, and I think he was a Manichaean before this. This is a guy that had gone through a lot of religious experiences looking for a fit. And first and foremost, he was a Hellenic philosopher.
Right.
So doctrine is what it's all about. This is a way that men who just sit and think and talk can convince enough people in power that what they've written should be law, here and hereafter. And hence you have a belief that there hasn't been a miracle since 325 BC. Amongst most Christians don't believe in miracles after 325 BC. This is, in a way, this is, in 325, you have the Christian bishops declaring that they are now presiding over a post-Christian human experience. It's really bizarre. If you really go back and look at the way that the people that were willing to die for their Christianity and wouldn't cuck out over money or a government position, how they saw things. The person that's documented it the most, that's still accessible, Edward Gibbon's, A History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. He could have done a whole book on just all the Christian disputes of the era, the Christian doctrine, the Christian experience, but he didn't. What he does is he uses chapters on the constitution of the church at certain times as breaks between the endless accounts of the backstabbing and the wars. So if you access that set of books and you go through the table of contents, you're going to be able to find about 8 chapters where he summarizes the work of the top Christian scholars from the Catholic side, which are all the French guys that he quotes,
Right.
and from the Protestant side, which are Germans and English, of the 1700s and the 1600s. The 1600s and the 1700s was when all the best Christian scholarship was done. The stuff that was done in the 1800s was either for making money or for getting into politics. It was basically, all the stuff in the 1800s was basically selling out for cash or for government. So if you really want to investigate, Christian doctrine and the different debates, you've got to go to the sources in the 1600s and the 1700s. And they still read the ancients. By the time you get to the 1800s, Christian philosophers are only reading one book. They're no longer reading any other ancient literature, so they don't have the context for the Gospels. For instance, Paul, the founder of the church,
Right.
he is on a ship in a storm going to Italy, and they all feel like they're about to die. And he's praying, and he says, an angel of the God I serve was with me. So even the man that nailed it down basically constructed the Christian religion, which Jesus Christ didn't construct the Christian religion. Paul did.
Right, yeah.
He is still using the old terminology, the God I belong to, the God I'm the servant to. There are other gods. The early Christians believed in other gods. Not that they were good, but that they were there. There were other powers.
Well, it's interesting, too, in terms of, ironically, the more, you could argue, more pagan Northern Europeans, when they seem to turn the religion into, they want to be more like this chosen tribe. That's kind of funny that we go from Odin to we was chosen and shit.
That happened in 50 years in Sweden and Norway.
Yeah.
If you look at the line, there was a formula developed that worked very good in Western Europe and Northern Europe for peaceful conversion of the pagans.
Peaceful.
Through appealing directly to the king through the king's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That worked. The peaceful conversions did not work in Eastern Europe. The Prussians fought for hundreds of years. The Lithuanians, Estonians, and Livonians fought for half a millennium. They fought for 400 years.
The Baltics were the last ones to be Christianized.
So when you look at Western Europe and you see that's where Protestantism occurs.
Right.
It occurs right along the line where the very quick conversion was done by appealing to similarities in the heathen religions and Christianity.
Right.
Just as the Catholics did in Spain and Peru, they did a same generation. It wasn't even a 2-generation conversion. They did the same generation conversion of the Aztecs and the Catholics because they appealed to the similarities.
Right.
So then you get a quick flip when the church splits during the Reformation, and it pretty much flips along that line of conversion.
Now, this is a call to a future bunch of videos. It's ironic that the Protestant and the Catholic thing seems to follow along the fault lines of where the Romans were.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty much the edge of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a call, but that's for a future vid.
Yeah, it's it's fascinating.
I do like I said with BTD in the end. Like I in terms of the Christians, I wish there wasn't like this split, and even amongst the pagans. In terms of obviously you could say, Catholicism has a lot of paganism in it. It's ironic that the more pagan people, when they become Christians, then want to become the desert people, right? But that's what we're made of. That's us Europeans. The contradictions and the constant fighting and friction. You could argue at one point was actually very useful. It actually made us kind of special. But now it just seems to be just gay and like making us like fucking losers. Anyway,
yeah, a lot of that gay stuff's been sliding into a lot of faiths. So that's interesting.
Interesting. All right, man. We're making the epic videos. That's right.
Thank you.